I can't believe that I finally read BookTok's most popular book of all time. I felt so left out. Join me as we talk about Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chrissy and this is my cozy corner. As you can already tell, we're going to be talking about Callie Hart's Quicksilver. Today I'm going to do a synopsis, then I'll do a spoiler-free section, and then a spoiler-filled section. And I'll also put chapters in the videos so you can skip around at your own convenience. So yeah, let's jump into the synopsis part. So in Quicksilver, we have our main character. Her name is Saris Fane. She's a thief, and she lives in this area called Zilverin, which is a desert-like world that kind of reminded me, I kept picturing Dune and like the desert dunes of Star Wars, kind of. It was a very like beautiful setting in my brain. Like it looked really beautiful, even though deserts aren't the ideal location to live in. But in Zilverin, water is rationed and stolen. So our main character has a certain ability. So she is called an alchemist. What she can do is she can manipulate this substance called Quicksilver. And what I found really cool about it was the Quicksilver was actually sentient and it had its own little personality. I'm trying to put my finger on what it reminded me of when it was speaking to her. Like, I guess think of like the dragons in Fourth Wing, sort of, but not that much conversation between the two of them. I just think the feel of it felt a little similar in that aspect. And I really like that. I always like when something has a sort of like sentient ability, whether it be like in A Deadly Education, it was the school, but the school didn't really talk to them, whereas the Quicksilver, it does speak to Saris. Now, all of that is cool, but what's most interesting is Saris comes into contact with Death himself, and she is transported, I'm not going to say exactly how she is transported, to another realm where she ends up like being in the middle of a centuries-old conflict, which is pretty unique in my opinion. You'll just have to read to find that out. So that is the synopsis of Quicksilver. Let's go ahead and move on to the spoiler-free section of kind of some of my thoughts about the book. The big question is, did I like this book? Yes. Yes, I liked this book, but there was such an overwhelming like love for it on TikTok and all over the place. I thought it was going to absolutely change my life. Like I thought I was going to read it and it was going to be a 6-star read and it was going to change my life, but that it didn't do that. It was still good, but it didn't do that. But what I will say is it definitely has the potential to become an epic fantasy romance for me. I definitely think it does have the potential, and I am really excited for book 2. Now, I do feel like I found quite a few things that were similar to ACOTAR. Not super similar to the point where it was like copying or anything like that. Definitely just inspired by, which I think a lot of ACOTAR lovers would love that about the book. So I feel like if you have read ACOTAR or Fourth Wing or any of those popular fantasy romances and you need to scratch an itch where you want something to give you a similar feel, then I do think Quicksilver is absolutely perfect for that. Do I think it was as good as ACOTAR? Well, no, it was only the first book in the series. I didn't even love the first book of the ACOTAR series, as a matter of fact. I thought it was good, just like I think Quicksilver is good. The first book in the ACOTAR series is probably one of my least favorite books in the whole Sarah J. Maas universe, but I still liked it and I was still invested in the story, and that is exactly how I feel about Quicksilver. And I think it was such a solid first book in a series. I will say I like Quicksilver better than the first ACOTAR book, but obviously the rest of the series is so epic and we haven't got as many books yet, so that's why I think it has a lot of potential. My biggest problem with reading Quicksilver has nothing to do with the book itself or the plot or anything like that. It's all good. It is the unrealistic expectations I went into it. I always tell myself, like, don't go in with super high expectations, because I feel like 9 times out of 10, you're going to be disappointed when you go into it with crazy high expectations. And that, again, is a me problem. Now, another thing is this book is marketed as enemies to lovers, but in my opinion, it's so not that. For me, enemies to lovers needs to be like, I want to like kill the other person, or I am from an opposing side of a conflict, or we're warring countries. So like that to me is enemies to lovers. Like think Bridge Kingdom, the Bridge Kingdom. For me, this is more like you irritate me and you're really hot to lovers. That's kind of how I felt about this, which I think like most books are in fact that trope and not so much enemies to lovers. So there was a couple of things that I didn't love about the book, and one of them is the beginning is slow. But at the same time, a lot of my favorite epic fantasy books or romantic fantasy books are always slow in the beginning. So it did take me a bit to get into. I would say maybe about a third, but once I like kind of went over that like bump, it was like smooth sailing from there, and I was like absolutely enjoying myself. So the beginning is slow. I definitely say if you were in the middle of reading it right now and you're feeling that way, just like push through it, because it does get really good as it goes. And my second thing is the romance happened just way too fast for me. I feel like I like a slow burn, and I wholeheartedly but respectfully disagree with the people who think this is a slow burn. For me, this was not a slow burn. I feel like they were already kind of like into each other too fast, and things happened quicker than I would have liked, but I still did love the romance. One of the things I loved about this book was the setting and then the change in setting. I feel like we're in one area, and then when we go to the next area, it's a very different, but I felt like I was just transported to these areas and just kind of just like sucked into that setting. And the characters are another thing that I felt like Callie Hart did so well. The characters were so good. I loved almost all the characters. I can't really even complain about any of them, really. Maybe like one of them, but I feel like there's more to that character. Anyway, I love the characters. I feel like I gained a new book boyfriend. I feel like I gained more than one book boyfriend, as a matter of fact. So like, good job on that, Callie Hart. As far as ratings go, initially upon finishing it and even like posting something quick on TikTok, I was like, yeah, it was a 4-star. It was a solid 4-star. And then the more that I thought about it, the more I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept thinking about the characters, kept wondering what's gonna happen next, kept making theories in my head. And I was like, wait, this was definitely more than just solid if I'm sitting here and I can't stop thinking about it. And then I kept thinking about the ending and all these things that happened in the book, and there was a couple plot twists that definitely got me. There were some things that I guessed, and there was definitely some twists that got me. So I originally did read the whole thing on my Kindle, but then I went to Barnes & Noble and I was like typing in Quicksilver, and I was like, ooh, my Barnes & Noble has the paperback. So I drove my little butt over to Barnes & Noble to get the paperback. And if I did that, that definitely means it's more than solid. So I'm gonna give it a 4.25. And as far as spice goes, I would say about 2.5 chili peppers. And that is the end of my spoiler-free discussion. So next is going to be the spoiler-filled yapping section. So if you have not finished the book or have not started the book, you definitely wanna go ahead and sign off now. But if you have read the book and you wanna listen to me yap about it and then comment down below your thoughts as well, let's go ahead and get started on that. So for this spoiler-filled yapping section, I'm gonna start with the characters and then I'll talk about the plot. But as far as characters go, I'm gonna start with Loreth. So Loreth is, to me, he felt so gentle and kind-hearted and admirable and loyal. I really liked his character. I can't wait to see more of him in the second book. But he was, just when he talked about how Fisher, he was dying at one point in his life and then Fisher saved him and didn't even really know him that well, but ended up saving him by giving him part of his soul. And really what that entailed was Fisher, if Loreth eventually does die, his soul is returned to him in full. And hopefully that doesn't happen, because I do like Loreth. I get like, oh, you know, let's see what Fisher is full souled, right? But I still wouldn't want that to happen to him, because I really do love him as a character. But if Fisher dies first and Loreth is still living, then Fisher is like existing but non-corporeal, and he's just like living but not. Like, it's like, it sounds like a terrible way to live. And Loreth is like, if he dies first, I will not go on. I will not put him through that. And I was like, oh, you are morally, yes, love him. And then Ren, I really loved Ren too. Ren is like the perfect friend. Like, he is the voice of reason. He is the kind of friend you want. And I teared up at this part, and I was not expecting to, but when he was like, Fisher and I are not brothers by blood, but we're brothers in all the ways that count, I was just like, I don't know why that made me tear up. I don't know what it was about that. And then there was a moment with Ceres when like the vampires were coming over, like they were, where were they? The vampires were coming up from the Darn, and then Ren is like, no, You promised him, she promised Kingfisher. I prefer to call him Fisher. I think it sounds better than Kingfisher. And they call him that throughout the book, so it's fine. And he's like, you promised him. And she was like, yeah, I promised him I would stay here. But anyway, they have this whole conversation back and forth, and then he eventually says to her, don't you dare die on my watch, Sarah's Fane. Fisher will never forgive me if his sole reason for living is torn to pieces on her first fucking battlefield. I mean, I don't know. Wren, I feel like he has a good rapport with all the characters in the book. He's very, very likable. Now, of course, we have to talk about Sarah's Fane and Kingfisher. I thought they had wonderful chemistry. I thought their banter back and forth was really good. I loved how he teased her and she just kind of gave it back to him. Although I loved all of that about their dynamic, I did not love that they got together so soon. I feel like I don't want you to kiss until well over halfway. I don't even want a spice scene until the end. Like, I need it to be a slow burn, and it wasn't, but that's okay. I liked it enough for that to have been like, okay, we'll just look past that a little bit. Now, the whole like mating thing was so obvious. Like, even before the tattoo showed up on Sarah's, it was obvious when Fisher picks up Carrion and takes him, and he's like, I can't smell you anymore because you know, he was like, you smell like Sarah's. So he makes him take a bath, and that's when, to me, it was obvious. Like, I was like, okay, this is a book about Fae, right? Fae mates, they always come together. Like, there's always some kind of mating thing with the Fae. So I knew, like, obviously they're mates. But I feel like even before starting the book, I figured that's what was going to happen. But I saw a really funny meme on TikTok, and it was by Fireheart Booktok is the TikToker's name. And I'll insert a clip of it here, but it says, Kingfisher finally realizing why he could track Carrion. And then after that, it says, Carrion just living his best life and getting free baths. I mean, I've seen this meme so many times, and I don't think I've laughed as hard as I did when I saw it for this specific, like, situation. All right, back to the mating thing. Does every fantasy romance book have to have a mating thing? Like, do we have to do that every single time? It becomes too obvious and too predictable when we do that. But I'm like, okay, a lot of my favorite romantic fantasy books have the mating thing. I love it still. I eat it up every single time. So, I mean, but sometimes I want something different. Like, sometimes I don't want that to be the case. But I mean, I guess it's fine because it's still like a very well-loved trope. So again, another thing I'll just like look past there, because like a lot of my favorite books have the mating bond trope. So I can't be too critical about it. Okay, let's talk about Filthy Mouth Fisher. Oh, honey. He had a filthy mouth. Like, the good kind, not like the icky kind, like the good kind. And I loved how he was like, you could tell he was obsessed with Sarah's, but he didn't want to show it. We find out why, obviously, at the end, why he didn't want to, but I loved this moment on page 393 to 394. And Carrion says, you're extra effing miserable today. You should really get laid. Tell him, Sunshine. And that's Carrion saying, tell him Sunshine to Sarah. So if you read it, you already know. Obviously, if you read it, you're probably here and you've left a long time ago if you haven't read it. I thought this was funny because Sarah's and Kingfisher had just did it. And this is page 393 to 394 where this is being talked about. So it's like, there's 650 plus pages in the book and y'all had already sealed the deal a while ago. It's kind of like, that's too fast for me, okay? And they kissed even sooner than that, but I digress. So then Fisher responds because Carrion calls her Sunshine. Then Fisher is like, don't call her Sunshine. Then he goes on to say, because she is moonlight, the mist that shrouds the mountains, the bite of electricity in the air before a storm, the smoke that rolls across a battlefield before the killing starts. You have no idea what she is, what she could be. You should call her Majesty. Kingfisher says that. Meanwhile, you know, our husbands are over here like, love you. Like, okay. Anyway, and if that didn't make you love him, you probably loved him when he was so bothered by the fact that Sarah's told him that 70% of the girls in their ward are sterilized at 14 because they're too poor to raise children. He was so upset. We all were like, I remember when I read that, I was like, oh, like, that's terrible. That is so terrible. And he just, you could tell, you could just feel that he felt so angry for her. I mean, that's a man. That's a man. And then there's this moment on page 487 where he looks at her and she's like, what? And then he goes, I was wrong, you know. You are a good thief. What have I stolen? And he doesn't answer. He just tells her to go to sleep. Clearly, he means you stole my heart is what he's trying to say. And we do find out towards the end that Fisher was trying to push her away the whole time because he knew all along that she was coming. He knew who she was. He knew that was going to be his girl, or that she was destined for him. And because of the Quicksilver that had been driving him mad, he doesn't want to like damn her with a life like that with him. So the whole time he had been trying to push her away. So that's where his like small like sad smile came from. Like, ugh, I was trying to prevent this from happening, but obviously their connection, everything with them was inevitable, as we learned from the very end of the book. And then I saved the best for last. So Carrion, I wanted to talk about Carrion. I love him so much. He quite possibly might be one of my favorite characters. I can't wait to get more of him in book 2. But I feel like every time he was on the page, he made me laugh out loud so hard. Like I was grinning, my cheeks were hurting. He was so funny, and like he had the riz. Do people still say that? I don't think so. That was a little cringy. But anyways, he had so much charisma. I just loved his little personality. I thought he had like a good banter with every character he was talking to. And then when him and Loreth were like throwing the daggers at the tree, well, he never got a chance to. He was just sitting there being the most poor sport that anybody could be. And it was so hilarious. And actually I could very much relate to him because I become a poor sport sometimes when I'm playing games. But anyway. Oh, and then Onyx, the little white fox. That's another character. So cute. I have a white husky. I'll insert a picture of her. But the white fox, I kept picturing my white husky Denali, but smaller. But I love that little addition of the little cute little animal friend. I thought that was so adorable. So now let's talk about the plot and some other like elements about the book. I really, really loved like the alchemy aspect of the book. I feel like I haven't seen like a lot of like fantasy romances do that. I thought that was very interesting. My gripe is that we didn't get enough of it. I wanted more, even more of it. And I think we'll see more of that in book 2, hopefully. But I really thought it was really interesting. But of course, Ceres is the best alchemist to ever have been born in the last century or thousands of years or something like that. I can't remember how long it had been, but I knew it was going to be, as soon as I found out she was an alchemist, I knew it was going to be something extra special. Like, she's extra special, you know, which is fine. It's a trope that a lot of books have. I really was interested when I found out, like, because I didn't know the vampires were gonna be like this main conflict in the book. Like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know a lot about the book. Like, I knew it was called Fae and Alchemy, and that's about all I knew about this book, and that everybody loved it. But I did not know there was gonna be like this centuries-old conflict between a vampire and Fae. And then you have like the vampire lord Malcolm, who if he sires you, he can completely turn you into a vampire. Or if he chooses not to completely sire you, you become like a vampire zombie thing. I thought that whole thing was cool. And I was so excited. I was ready for like a full-out war between the Fae and the vampire. And maybe that's coming later. I don't know. Especially with the ending of the book with Ceres. But I don't know. I liked the action at the end of the book. I thought it was really good. But I wanted to see like Malcolm was talked about to be so scary. And like, I don't know. I wasn't really scared of him. I didn't feel like super scared by him at the end of the book. Like, I was like, oh, they got it. Like, they got this. I really feel like Malcolm could have caused more chaos before he was killed off, but that's okay. And I predicted, like, early on that Madra and Belican had something to do with him. Like, I knew they were on the evil side. Like, I knew that they were gonna have some kind of cahoots with Malcolm. I just like had an inkling about it, and maybe that was obvious. I don't know, tell me down in the comments if you thought that was obvious. I thought it was. I will say I tend to sometimes figure things out. Like, I already said a couple things that I had figured out in the book, but I feel like Callie Hart got me on some things, and I was just kind of like, oh, like these were twists. Like, I was not aware that that was gonna happen at all as plot twists go. But Carrion being like the last born son of a Fae throne, that threw me. I was like, what? Like, what? As soon as he said, come bite me, go ahead, I was like, okay, something's weird about this. And then I started to catch on that something was off. Like I was like, what does he have in his blood that would cause him to say that? I did not expect for it to be that. I can tell you that right now. I'm really excited that he has more of an interesting backstory, because I thought he was just the comic relief the whole time. And I was fine with that, but I'm excited to see more of him. I hear there's supposed to be like a book, maybe book 3 would be like more centered around him. And I will be the first person like at midnight to get that book, because I love him. I think he is my favorite character. Like, yes, like Fisher is hot and a book boyfriend 100%, but Carrion is too. He is like right there. I really don't know who is ahead. We get more of Fisher, so probably him, but Carrion, yes. Oh, it's just so funny. He's so my type of character. The other twist that got me was the God of Chaos intervening between Fisher and Ceres, because they're like, connection could mean the end of the world. Like, I was like, wait, what? Like, I knew she was gonna turn fae. I mean, come on. We've all been there if we've read romantic fantasy books involving fae. Eventually that love interest that's not fae turns fae. I knew that was gonna happen. I didn't know how it was gonna happen. I did not know that she was going to be turned vampire and fae. And I was just kind of like, whoa, okay, well, that's a different twist right there. I thought that was really cool. So we have like a hybrid creature over here, like Klaus Michelson, which is awesome. But if there's a vampire war still a coming, but now she's the vampire queen, because she doesn't want to be. She was like, oh heck no at the end. I'm super interested to see how that goes. See, the more I talk about it, the more I want to keep bumping it up. Like, I'm like, oh, and yes, this, and yes, that. So all the plot twists pretty much got me, except for some of those obvious things that I mentioned earlier, but those wouldn't be considered plot twist in my opinion. So yeah, and then there's Taladeus, who sired her, and Taladeus and Fisher already have like a trust between them. They had mentioned before, you know, their past before he became sired, so that made sense. Think about it. Taladeus sires Ceres. I was about to call her Poppy. Ceres. There's a thing called a sire bond. What if she has a whole sire bond thing with him, which I don't think is going to happen. I'm not saying I'm for it. I don't know enough about Taladeus to be for it, because obviously Fisher is like her end all be all mate, and we love that for her. We want Fisher to stay. But I'm just saying, like, just putting it out there. We have Fisher, who trusts Taladeus. The way he talked to him was in this very just like calming, trustworthy friendship, kinship tone. And then he sires his woman. So I'm wondering, not saying like it's gonna be like, yes, I'm for it. I'm just kind of theorizing just a little bit here. So yeah, the more I talk about this, the more I'm like, nah, this was good. This was really good. I think I just had to like yap about it to you guys to maybe figure my thoughts out. I might bump it up, but for now we're gonna leave it at 4.25. So good, more than solid. I went into this video thinking this was a solid read, to coming out thinking this is more than solid. So yeah, thank you for that. I had a lot of fun. This is my first video on here where I just purely do one book review, and I really liked deep diving into one book, so I'm probably gonna do this again in the future. So if you want to check that out, I post videos every Sundays, and maybe we continue these book conversations, and hopefully I see you there, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Comment down below, did you like Quicksilver? What do you think of any of the things I said? We can have a conversation. Let's further this conversation, because that's why I come on here, is to have more conversations with people about books. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.